My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
Cannot believe it's been 20 years and what happened? This headline, a little over a year after the start of the invasion, explains it all. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They sold us a bill of goods. That is exactly what this country did. There were some folks who understood that at the time. And besides, this country destabilized the Middle East by doing that in Iraq. A massive failure that cost taxpayers trillions and has been dissected even more as the years go on, especially from recent reports. And not only did it cost our country, it cost the lives of many, many people, both Americans and Iraqis and forces from other countries as well. The US military is about to surpass 20 years since invading Iraq. A war that has cost more than 550,000 lives and nearly 1.8 trillion. According to a report released Wednesday, the cost of war project predicted the dollar amount will swell to 2.89 trillion by 2050 when factoring in the cost of caring for veterans of the Iraq war and subsequent operations in Iraq and Syria to counter ISIS. A massive failure this has been. 20 years later, Norman Solomon is reflecting on the failures, the lies, and the lessons that we haven't yet learned from this war. The headline, the urbanity of evil, 20 years after the US invasion of Iraq. And he goes on to write, what propelled the United States to start the war on Iraq in March of 2003 were dynamics of media and politics that are still very much with us today. Soon after 9/11, one of the rhetorical whips brandished by President George W. Bush was an unequivocal assertion while speaking to a joint session of Congress on September 20th, 2001. Quote, every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists, end quote. Norm Solomon in that quote is quoting what Bush Jr. had to say about that. Now, Norman effectively dives into the same rhetoric that is being used on the American people right now today. Let us take a look. Our current era is filled with echoes of such oratory from the current president a few months before fist bumping Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, Mohammed bin Salman, who's been in charge of a tyrannical regime making war on Yemen, causing several 100,000 deaths since 2015. With US government help, Joe Biden mounted a pulpit of supreme virtue during his 2022 State of the Union address. Biden proclaimed, quote, an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny, end quote. And he added that, quote, in the battle between democracy and autocracies, democracies are rising to the moment. Of course, there was no mention of his support for Saudi's autocracy and war. Mayor, Norman is laying it out.
Listen, I think he did a wonderful job like he always does, and it forces us to be uncomfortable in what we all got tricked, we got hoodwinked, right?
Yeah.
America used media to promulgate a war that was false. Like, it is not okay just to say that Russia should not be in Ukraine, because what Russia did in Ukraine is what America did in Iraq. And if we're not strong enough and honest enough with ourselves to say that, then what we're doing is we're defending old wars to prepare for new wars. That's all it seems like to me. If we're not prepared to say that America should not have been in Iraq ever, which means we didn't save them, we actually destroyed them. Not just them, we destroyed the entire region. We created more terrorists by going in Iraq when we knew this war was false. We knew people were lying. We knew when CNN said, when the head of CNN said, We went to the Pentagon and asked them which generals we should use as experts to talk about the war leading up to the war. We knew when CBS, ABC, all of them had 97% of their experts were either contractors or old generals that supported this war. And only one person dared in the 2 weeks leading up on media dared to go against or critique the war. Right? So we knew we sat back and got hoodwinked. No one questioned why all the experts are saying this war was inevitable. When we saw Tariq Aziz, who we're not saying was innocent, but he was a deputy of security in Iraq during that time, we watched this man say, it doesn't matter if we are inspected or not, America wants war and she will have it.
Yeah.
So even after they opened the doors, we forget, they eventually opened the doors to the UN inspectors to investigate. But America still launched because they said, Bush used that lie and said, well, we can't wait till there's a smoking gun because that smoking gun may be a mushroom cloud when we're the only country guilty of creating a mushroom cloud.
That's it. Only nation to bomb, to use nuclear weapons. Only nation to use nuclear weapons. Ain't that something? And here is where, and Norman goes even deeper. This is where he drops the hammer on Biden's rhetoric and how he hasn't learned the lessons from what went wrong in the Iraq war. Norman writes, in the State of the Union speech, Biden devoted much emphasis to condemning Russia's war on Ukraine, as he has many times since. Biden's presidential hypocrisies do not in any way justify the horrors that Russian forces are inflicting in the Ukraine. Nor does that war justify the deadly hypocrisies that pervade US foreign policy. You better say that, Norman Solomon, and thank God for that kind of courage.